Hello and welcome. This is Jacob Jewett. You're watching the Jacob Jewett IT training and consulting channel. Um, Tonight I have a very cool interview with Matthew Mitchell. Matthew Mitchell has been in IT for 22 plus years. Matter of fact, me and Matt go back quite a while. We started in elementary school together and then moved through elementary school, through high school, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of that tonight. But without further ado, after I turn up the audio here for Matt, Matt Mitchell is going to join me right now. How you doing, Matt?
I'm well, Jacob. How are you?
I am doing good. This has been a while. It's been a while since me and you've gotten together and talked about anything. I think I ran into Home Depot. I ran into Home Depot. I ran to you in Home Depot as I was getting ready to move from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I think that was like the last time we talked until I guess you saw one of my videos and was like, "Hey."
Yeah, it was the only time I've met your wife. You were just getting ready to leave. Um, and then the YouTube algorithm somehow connected us and you popped up in my stream and I was tickled to see you doing this and kind of started the dialogue with you. So I'm glad we reconnected. It's been way too long.
Yeah, it's definitely been too long. I mean, I'm seeing that that's happening with a couple of my friends. So like, I saw you jump in there. I saw Jonathan jump in there. I've constantly been talking with Antonio Moore, so that one wasn't too hard. But the one that jumped out for us was our mentor Phil. He responded to a comment of yours, and it was really fun to see that and catch up with him. So, what you been doing with yourself, sir?
Oh, so the big news is I started a new job and took a new position. I started yesterday. I'm now at the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, my hometown, Bakersfield, and got a really cool, really smart, talented team. I think it's gonna work out well for me. It was a good shift. It was the right time. I left a position at the wonderful company of 16 years. It was very sad and hard for me to make that decision, but some health reasons and family reasons, I needed just a slight change, and so that's the big news.
Yeah, well, you went from you kind of took a little bit of a step down with this new position, right? Like,
I wouldn't say that. I shifted. I'm no longer a people manager.
okay,
People, people see that as a demotion, but I really don't. I get very excited doing the engineering work. That's really the stuff that keeps me going. And you know, I think you put on there that I have 22 plus years in the IT world. I had very few years in the people management world, and it's such a different skill set. Um, People are so much less predictable than systems. And so I felt like I was starting over and I had some failures and I had some successes, but it's a skill set that I picked up a lot from. And so as I moved back to an engineer position, I think I have an advantage because I have that experience managing people. And it's just my journey. And so I don't look at it as a step down or a demotion or anything. It's just where I am today.
yeah, maybe I misstated that because I don't really look at it as a demotion at all either. So like that I owned a company back in 2005 through like 2009, and I've talked about it on this channel quite a bit. I mean, I had 5 employees, and you know I I I've never been a manager for a corporation, but I know what it was like to be a manager for a small business, and going from needing to make sure that you put food on your table for yourself to then you're responsible for putting food on the table for like 5 people, and it's not only your family depending on you, it's their families depending on you to make sure that they get a paycheck. So it's like chasing after customers and stuff like that. But at your level, you were dealing with people directly. I remember that I applied for a job at Wonderful at one time, and almost ended up working for you or working on the same team.
I would have loved to have you on the team. It wasn't the right time and the right fit at that moment. And unfortunately for me, I didn't get my friend Jacob on the team.
Yeah,
But it's that's your story too, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just it's funny how things work out. It's one of the things that I found funny, kind of like with our relationship, is I I I vaguely remember you in elementary school. Like, I think where we kind of got together was in junior high. I remember I was starting to do BBSs and stuff like that with an old Packard Bell computer, and I would have you come over, and I showed you like what I was doing on a floppy disk to get my games to start without having to go through all the work. Just pop a floppy disk in, and it accessed everything it needed. And then I picked up Wildcat BBS at a yard sale for like $2 or something stupid like that. And I remember like calling you up and saying, "Hey, dial into my BBS. Tell me what you think."
So those days, man, what it would be like to be a kid again.
Oh man.
Those days, do you remember Naren Sharon Batonikit, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he was the one that actually got me into it. He introduced me to running a BBS. He did that from his house, and then I went crazy and just like my curiosity got the better of me, and I was doing anything and everything I can to figure this stuff out, and ASCII art and running war dialers, trying to find different BBSs. And then Mustang Software had, they were a local of all software developer houses, they were a local development house in Bakersfield. They just happened to have Wildcat BBS, and
Yep.
I got a copy of it as well. And back in the days, we were copying floppies and,
Oh yeah.
and trading. And yeah, so you had, if I remember correctly, it was a Scouts BBS, and it was like just in the evening. And I was like, "Oh, Jacob did it. He is successful, and we're 13 or 14 years old, and this dude is a genius. He did it." And then you invited me over, and you were showing me, yeah, you had a bunch of floppies. But back in the days, you had autoexec.bats and config.sys's, and it was your DOS boot disk, right? And so you would create custom configs, and it would load up the application that you wanted, but it would like, if you were running Doom 2 off of the hard disk, you wouldn't load the CD-ROM drivers, or if you were running, what was the other game, Myst or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Mist and was it was it oh god, what, I forget the name of it. King's Quest.
King's Quest, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just like it was the Wild West back then. There was no rules, and we were just doing these weird things that the generation before us had their experiences,
Yeah.
but everything was evolving. It was just the funnest time of there's so much unknown, and there's so much to learn in our reach.
Yeah.
That
So
we were all kind of just going crazy.
yeah, so me and you were doing that. I think it was like junior high into like freshman year in high school. And I left my sophomore year. I went up to Sacramento. I lived up north for like a year, and they up there. I was kind of surprised in the El Dorado Hills area. You know how you go to the store and you see like the Auto Trader magazines and stuff like that you can pick up for free or whatever. They had one that was called CRN, Computer Resource Network or something like that. It was a magazine that you would find at like Safeway, and it was free. And what was really cool is you go in and they would have this whole directory in the back, like a phone book of all these BBSs. And so I just went really crazy with it when I went up there. And so I wasn't so much hosting one anymore as I was trying to dial in and see what I could do on other people's BBSs and just doing crazy stuff. I got thrown off many BBSs because it was always like, I think it was towards version 4.5 or version 5 of Wildcat. You could actually have a different connection. Like with AOL or something, and you could share the internet through your BBS.
Yeah.
So that was how I was getting my internet.
Same. I was doing the same thing through. I want to say it was the actual BBS that Mustang was running, but it might have been something weird. There was like missing links, and there was a bunch of cool BBSs around
Oh
town.
yeah, there was some crazy stuff. I got into one time that I was like, oh, I'm getting out of here right now. Like there was plenty of those.
Yeah, there was those, and then every once in a while, we would trade pirated software. I remember the coolest thing was there was CruiseNet.
Yeah.
Frank Cruz, who he was involved in the IT world, but I knew him only through the radio. He was a radio DJ on Crab Radio. And I met like Danny Spanks through he had CruiseNet, but he had like 30-second wave files of like popular songs.
Yeah.
And I remember downloading it was a song by the Verve Pipe.
Oh, Only Freshman?
I think it was Freshman. I downloaded 30 seconds of it, and it was like the first like song I ever listened through my computer speakers.
Yeah.
Everything else was just like MIDI beeps and stuff. It blew my mind, and I just opened up the another rabbit hole of cool stuff.
Well, the cool thing about Danny Spanks is like this is obviously years later. This was out when we were out of high school. I'm a big fan of Green Day. To this day, I'm still a big fan of Green Day. And I may not be on the same political spectrum as them, but I still like their music. And so back when American Idiot came out, I still can't remember how I did it, but I got an early release. And I was able to buy the CD before it was even released out to the radio stations and stuff like that. They had some kind of deal where you got the book set, and it was, pre-release kind of thing. And so I got it, and I listened to it, and the first time I listened through that thing, I knew it was going to be a hit. Like, I just knew it was going to take them to the next level. I mean, they came out with, like, Dookie, and then they had a couple other albums after that didn't hit as big as Dookie did. But then I heard American Idiot, and I was like, oh, my God, this is going next level. So I was listening to the radio one night. I know this is off topic, but I think it's kind of cool.
Oh, on topic.
So one night, I'm listening to the radio, and I hear Danny Spanks, and he's talking about the new Green Day album that's coming out, and there's a lot of speculation on it and this and that. So I called him up at the radio station. I'm like, hey, Danny Spanks, I actually have a copy of it. He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah, I definitely have a copy of it. He goes, I don't believe you. I said, no, seriously, I have an actual printed copy of it. And would you like to hear it? And he goes, yeah, I would. And I said, can I come down to the studio? And he's like, yeah. So I went down to the studio. I had to wait until he was on a commercial break. I'm knocking on the door. He comes down, lets me into the studio. We sit there, have a great conversation. And I think he put me on the radio at one point or something like that. Anyway, so I leave there, and I leave him the copy of American Idiot. Like, I trusted him with the copy of American Idiot. First time I ever met the guy. So he borrows it so he can listen to it. About a week later, he calls me, gives me it back, and Green Day had just announced their tour, and one of their first stops was Bakersfield for their American Idiot tour. And so I go back, he gives me the copy back, and he goes, hey, would you like to meet Green Day? I was like, dude, I'd love to meet Green Day. He's like, okay, well, I'll get set up for you. We'll work it out. And so he gets me free tickets to the show, all that stuff. I'm like psyched. It's like the third time I've seen Green Day. I'm like, I'm going to get to meet him. He calls me just before the concert, and he goes, dude, I'm sorry. They only allowed a certain number. I couldn't get you in to actually meet Green Day, but, I'll do what I can do. And so I go to I was cool with it. I got free tickets. What do I care? So I go to the concert, have a great time. My brother gets a drumstick from Trey Cool, and we're like, perfect event. 2 days after the concert, I get a call from Danny Spanks, and he goes, hey, dude, I got something for you. I said, okay. So I go down to the station. He comes out and he gives me a concert placard with all their signatures on it.
Oh, how cool.
And I was like, it's actually sitting back there on a shelf. It's still,
Oh,
I don't have it displayed. It's gotten kind of beat up through the years, but it is like, dude, Danny Spanks. A funny thing about the guy, he does not look anything like he sounds on the radio, but he is a cool dude.
I don't think any of them sound like they, look like they sound, but he is just the nicest guy. I think even I probably haven't seen him in probably close to 15 years, but if I ran across him, he would probably address me as Cowhead. That was my handle on CruiseNet BBS, and that's just what he knew me as.
Yeah, well, he knew you through music too, because you were in a band that was kind of getting pretty popular in Bakersfield for a while, weren't you?
I was, in the early 2000s, and it's a relative term, pretty popular. It was me and some of my friends, and we got some free beer, and that was gold in your early 20s. You get to go hang out with your buddies at bar and drink for free.
Dude, I heard you guys were the next Corn. What are you talking about?
Oh man, I don't know who wished that evil on us, but I definitely would not take it.
So going back to I guess topic. So I leave for Sacramento in my sophomore year. And I did some stuff up there. I worked with Oak Ridge High School. I was a student, but back then they were using students to do computer repair and stuff like that. So I come back, and I hadn't seen you in a while. Matter of fact, when I met you in Mrs. Johnson's classroom, of all people.
The band teacher?
I'm probably using the wrong name. No, it was I think U.S. history or no literature. Remember the teacher we had the first day of school? She stood up in front of the class, showed off her diploma, and said, "I have one of these. You don't question me."
Was it? If it
Goodell?
was,
Not Goodell. It was
It was Frindell.
Frindell. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, she was just a small little old lady, like.
She was nice enough. I mean, she could be off-putting sometimes, but
so she was a shit talker, and she had to hold it back. And when I finally, by the time I got around to my senior year, and we had that rapport,
yeah,
it was cool because she was a shit talker, and it was okay.
Yeah, and I got to know her later on because I ended up working for the high school after I graduated there. Yeah. But a funny story. At one point, I almost became her roommate at one time.
How funny.
Yeah. So anyway, when we were in her classroom, I remember that me and you used to sit next to each other, and we kind of it took me a second because I was dumb to realize who you were. And then once I realized who you were, because you had changed in a year and I had changed in a year. And I remember me and you were always getting in trouble with Miss Frindell because we were always talking. And during one of these times that we got in trouble, I was talking to you about computers and what I had done at Oak Ridge, and you said, "Hey, have you met Phil?" And I said, "No, who the hell is Phil?" And you said, "Oh, he's the IT guy here, and you need to meet him. I bet you could become a TA for him. I'm a TA for him. You need to go on his team." And so... So you introduced me to Phil, and so and sure enough, me and him hit it off, and next thing you know, he became my mentor, and he was your mentor. I'll never forget the car he had where you rode up in the front seat one day, and we were going to Carl's Jr., which was his place of choice, and you rode on the dash, the Phil mobile. And that stayed on the dash up until until I quit working for South High.
Oh, he was scared to wash that car because he said the dirt was holding it together.
Oh man, it didn't have brakes. He had worn the brakes all the way through to where the pistons that do the pads were what was acting as the brake on his car.
I believe it.
It was really crazy, But no, so I have to credit you with introducing me to the guy that helped change my life, because I was not the best student in high school, and I think I don't know if you want to tell the story if enough time has passed, but I had heard rumors, and I need you to clarify this for me.
I'm scared of what's
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the rumor, and you tell me if it's true or set me straight on it. Okay.
Sure.
And if I go too far with it, you could tell me to shut up and I'll stop. But so at one point, I think it was, we had a crew of guys that worked with us as students with Phil. And of course, what's his name that was, I know his name, but it is escaping me right now. But he was his assistant at the time.
It was you and Kareem.
Yeah, Kareem was too tall for himself, right? He was always tripping over himself. Anyway,
and I think there was David that came, but he came later.
Yeah. So So anyway, one of them had told me at one point, and I also heard from another teacher that before you met Phil or you were working with Phil, that you had done something on the South High Computer Network that basically got you kicked out of school, and Phil had found out what you had done and kind of chased you down to find out how you did it, and then ended up bringing you back to the school to work with him as a student. So straighten me out on this, because I know bits and pieces of it, and I know I'm not doing it justice.
Yeah, so something that we all take for granted is that there's an unlimited amount of information on the internet. And back then we did not have the internet. There was we had Trumpet Windsock client, and we had Telnet.
Gopher.
Yeah, Gopher. So when software would break, you were making a phone call and dropping a credit card and getting support, and this weird, it wasn't like it is today.
Yeah.
But so that just kind of leads into it was like Tuesday night lab. You'd go in there and do homework, and I was definitely a geek and would go in there as a hobby to chase and learn and figure these things out. And I had deleted some files off of my home drive, and it was so this was on an NT3, I want to say 3.12. It was the old IBM iClass client laying on top of it. I'm probably butchering what it actually was. But back in the days with that Novell system, there was a bunch of map drives and a bunch of these sysvols and all these home drives. And it was kind of confusing. And I was young, so I didn't know. And I was learning DOS at the time. And I ran an undelete command on my home directory trying to fix my file. And that command hung, and it never released and never did anything. About at the same time, people started complaining to the person running the lab, and it was the French teacher. He taught Mr. Steele.
Oh, okay. Mr. Steele.
And
yeah.
And super nice guy. All of the computers stopped working, and we were all kind of confused. And we shut down lab that night kind of early. And the next morning, shit hit the fan. I keep saying the S word.
It's fine. I got this on PG-13 plus. We're good.
I didn't even cross my mind, man.
You're
Sorry.
fine. You're fine.
Yeah, so I ended up getting in some trouble. They traced it down to my workstation. I was sitting there. I didn't lie or hide anything. It was just kind of I was confused as everybody else was, and I really wanted to know. So I was chasing the answer as well. And apparently there was a bug in that system. And if you run undelete from a DOS 5.0 against this volume, the perfect conditions apply where it corrupts the user database. And so it messed up the entire network, the whole domain for several days. And I pled my case and pled my case and pled my case. And I wasn't trying to do anything malicious.
Yeah.
I'm not in here hacking or trying to break stuff. And Phil was like, okay, well, you got to work for me then. Like, okay, like that's not a dumb thing to do. Like you deleted a file
Yeah.
and deleted this. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so, he taught me at the time it was IPX, SPX, and then he built a gateway or I guess the technical network plus term would be a bridge
Yeah.
that took the IPX, SPX and shot it over to TCP/IP. And he taught me all this stuff. And we took hubs. We had dumb hubs with twin axe backbones and replaced them with Cat5. And he taught me how to crimp cables. And man, he was the quirkiest dude I've ever met in my life. Like he had stories from the military and just the craziest off the wall stuff came out of his mouth.
But
And
he
the
was
smartest guy I know still.
yeah, but he was like the smartest dude. He what graduated MIT, right? If I remember correctly. He graduated MIT, and the guy could literally build a processor at the time that we knew him, right? Like I remember talking to him about that stuff. But so did I ever tell you about my first day meeting Phil? Like actually meeting Phil? So you introduced me to Phil. You brought me in and you told him who I was, and you told him the floppy disk story and stuff like that. And basically he asked me a couple questions, and basically I said to him that I was God's gift to computers at the time. Like that cocky kind of thing that you would, as a kid say. And so I remember doing that, and he said, okay, he kind of got this grin on his face, the Phil grin, right? And he took the paper and he signed it so I could become a TA. And we were TAs on different periods, right? So you were a different period than me. And so the first day I go into that back office off of D35 Computer Lab.
Yep.
And I'm sitting at the chair. The server rack is in front of us. He's standing by the server rack, and he's telling me about, computers, like asking me questions and stuff like that. And, I'm still in the phase of, I'm God's gift to computers. So in the time that he's talking to me, I pick up a pair of crimpers. And how you put them together, they kind of make that clicking sound and stuff like that. And I was kind of messing with them a little bit. I was just kind of squeezing them, whatever. And and so Phil's telling me about stuff, and he starts talking about networks. I'd never known about TCP/IP networks or switches or hubs or routers and stuff like that. And he's showing me stuff on the rack, and I'm really kind of mesmerized by it because, okay, yeah, I know how to put a hard drive in a computer, but I don't know this crap, right? So he's telling me about it, and he's basically putting me in my place, as nice as Phil can put someone in their place. While he's doing this, I'm messing with these crimpers, and a finger got in the wrong place. So how on the crimpers it has the two blades that come together, yes, and they don't come all the way together, but they come enough to like get the shielding off the cable.
Yeah.
Well, my finger got between those two blades.
Oh my God.
And I sliced my finger open. I realized I did it because instantly it was like, oh crap. I undid the crimper, put it on the table real quick. He was facing away from me. I grabbed some napkins I found on the counter. Later on, I found out that you never want to use napkins off of that counter because you never knew where those napkins had been, right? Oh. So I grabbed some napkins, I wrapped it around my finger, and I just kind of held my finger the whole time he was talking to me, and I don't think he ever knew, but the first day I met the guy, I chopped my finger. But
wasn't that like when the first time you walked into that server room? By today's standards, it was pretty janky because it was just a table, but it had a couple tower servers on it. Yeah. And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
It had like a 12 drive SCSI like CD jukebox.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. He had a one single speed CD burner that he borrowed from Marty at Stockdale that plugged into your parallel port. And just the technology, like that step forward of understanding of what exists out there just absolutely blew my mind.
Dude, we were doing stuff that the other schools weren't doing at the time. I know that at the time we had like the only like that I forget the Catalyst network router that he had that was like it took half of the rack.
So
And
it was a 6-port switch.
Yeah.
And it was like, today we buy switches at Walmart that have 12 ports on them for like $20. But this was a 6-port switch that had the collision detection.
Yep.
And that was unheard of back then. And it was carrier grade equipment, and it's separated out the halls, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was mind blowing to learn what that was back then.
Yeah. Separated the halls. And I remember us pulling cable throughout that school.
Oh,
I mean, just like, you think union workers did that crap? No, students did.
oh
Like
man.
almost every lab that got built at that school was built by a student. I remember, Antonio Sosa, right?
Yeah, Tony Sosa.
Yeah. So I
Great guy.
remember Antonio coming in when he was being brought under Phil's wing, and like one summer he came in and. Me and Antonio had a run-in at one point prior to that. I don't know if you heard this story or not, but it's a funny story we like to share.
Is it one you can share?
Huh?
Can you share it? I want to know.
Oh, you want me to share it? Okay.
So I like Tony's a great friend of mine. Like we have a really close bond, and we actually work together at General Electric.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know you know him well, and so Antonio, prior to working for Phil, if you remember, we used to play a Total Annihilation at the time.
Oh yeah,
crazy, crazy. So anytime we had downtime, Phil would be in the back office. He would have it up on his computer. Dave would have it on his computer, and I'd be sitting at the desk that kind of butted up to Dave's desk, and I'd be playing Total Annihilation. We'd play it for the whole period. Or after school while kids were in there doing research or whatever. Anyway, I think this particular time was after school. And I was just having a really hard time. At the time, all through high school, I worked 3 jobs. I went to school, and I also had my dad on my back, right? So whatever reason, usually I'm a light-going person. That day, I had a ton of things on my shoulders, and I just wasn't having it, right? Well, you know how Antonio is, right? Or Tony is. He's the kind of guy that likes to mess with you, like all the time. If he can find a way to mess with you, he'll mess with you. And he likes to tell a lot of jokes, right?
His practical joke game is on point.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He's good.
I gotta tell you the story about me getting appendicitis and him giving me a ride to the hospital one day. Anyway, so this particular day, I'm sitting there. I'm like losing my ass on Total Annihilation, just losing my ass, and I'm taking it hard. Like I'm not taking it the light way that someone who would lose would take it. I'm taking it hard, and out of nowhere, someone hits me on the shoulder and goes, "Oh man, you suck!" And I was like, "Dude, just leave me alone, whatever." And so I'm playing again, and like I want to say 2-3 minutes later, he does it again. "Oh man, I thought you sucked before, but you really suck." I'm like, "Dude, just leave me alone." I'm playing like 5 minutes later. He puts his hand on my shoulder to do that again. I pop up out of my chair, throw the chair across the room, and I'm face to face with Antonio. Now, if you've never met Tony, he was playing football at the time. He's a big guy. He was one of our good players. And that year, our football team was kicking butt and taking names. I think they got the region or something at that, if I remember correctly. Anyway, he's a big guy. He's always been a big guy. He's just a stocky build guy. And at that time, I was probably at my lightest. I used to run everywhere, so I was like, but I was face to face with this guy, and I said, "Leave me the F alone." God, I'm like in his face, and just like not having it. And he goes, oh, I think I said something like, I'm going to kick your ass, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not one that ever gets in a fight, but I was down, right? And I forget who, there was a teacher in the classroom, and everyone turned around. Like the classroom was packed. Everyone turns around and is looking our direction at crazy Jacob that's gone postal, right? And so I'm choosing Tony off, and he says to me, he goes, "Oh, you're going to kick my ass?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, you think you'll win?" I said, "I may not win, but I'm going to hurt you going down." And then he goes, oh, okay. He backed off, left me alone. I don't see the guy at all for a while after this, right? I don't see him. Maybe I think it was like during the summer. That was at this end of the school year, going into the summer. During the summer, we were building another lab. I think we were rebuilding Mr. Johnson's. He had a new program he was doing with his art or whatever, and we were rebuilding his lab.
Yeah.
And so we were, doing each cable ending ourselves, and doing all the jacks and stuff. And I'm in this room doing like 24 or 25 drops by myself, pulling the cable, putting the conduit up, all that stuff. And so I'm doing all this, and Phil walks in with this guy that I barely notice, right? And he goes, "Hey, Jake, I got someone that's joining us. This is Tony Sosa, and he needs some extra credits or what have you. Would you show him how to make cables?" I'm like, "Yeah, nah, no problem." I'm not really noticing who he is, but being part of Phil's team, you just help each other out. So I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'll show him. Phil leaves the room, and Antonio sits down, and I'm sitting there, and we're face to face. I'm showing him how to do the color code, and crimping a couple of cables to show him. And I looked at him, and then it hit me who he was. And I was like, "Aren't you the guy?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Oh." And he goes, "Yeah, I was wondering who was going to bring it up." I said, "Yeah, dude, you got me at the wrong time." And I said, "You know what? Hey, my name's Jacob Jewett. Nice to meet you." And he introduced himself, and we were just good friends from there on. It was a crazy thing, but yeah.
Man, he's a prankster, but he's a sweetheart underneath all that.
Oh,
but yeah, no, I'm a big guy, but Tony is freaking strong, and I would not want to go head to head with him. I actually ran into him. Less than a year ago. It was right at the end of summer. I ran into him at a little vegan restaurant here in town, and he's lost some weight. He looks great.
Yeah. Did he finally get married?
He got married. He had a very pretty wife with him.
Yeah.
He told me that he just he started his own outfit.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's doing really good. So I'm really happy for him. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he was working for Grapevine for a while there. I thought, or someone that broke off of Grapevine. I forget who exactly it was, but he was working with Josh for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it Tris or something?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's
a lot of them. It's such a small community too of us nerds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We all end up meet each other, and there was a gentleman named Leaf that I just met at he sits next to me at my new job.
Yeah.
I met him probably 8 or 9 years ago at a Kern ISSA meeting. I met him one time and he remembered me. He's been super helpful. He's been the only way I've made it 2 days.
There's another guy that works with you at the I gotta look up. I worked with him at Bolt House when I worked at Bolt House. Gosh, what's his name? When he applied for the Kern applied for the Kern superintendent of schools, he asked me for advice, and I gave him some advice, and I'll have to look up his name, but offline I'll tell you who he is. And but yeah, I believe he works with you on your team. right now. He's a cool guy, but yeah, it's just a small community. I mean, I was talking to Antonio Moore like a month and a half ago, and we were talking about the company that shall not be named that still runs in Bakersfield. Uh, it starts with an A, ends with a C, and how they used to talk crap about techs and stuff, and how that didn't give them such a great following. But no, I mean, we could go stories all day. That some of the fun stuff that you end up with, and like so you got into IT mostly because you screwed up, right? Like,
Well, if you're talking IT as as a professional industry, yeah. So I
like, did you think? I sorry to interrupt you, but like, before Phil got you under his wings, was that a career path that you thought you were going to go down? Like, when did like IT become like a possible career for you?
so IT and just computer nerds and gamers, there's such an overlap there, right?
Yeah.
I think, I started doing a bunch of weird stuff with Kareem using QBasic.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then Phil had given me a copy. There used to be a program, Microsoft Select, where they would mail you all of the CDs,
Yeah.
right? And he gave me Visual Basic 4.0. And I took all of this basic knowledge and started making GUI stuff. And that blew my mind. And I made this, I don't think any teacher used it, but it was like an assignment management tool.
I remember
And
that.
I realized, oh, I could do stuff that has real value and it's not just a game or a toy. And so I actually chased out of high school, I was chasing a development career path. I thought I wanted to code for a living.
Yeah.
And I got on with through just a series. Okay, so I want to stop right here.
Okay.
So if there's a lesson to be learned right here, anybody watching this, if there's anybody younger than us watching, the lesson to be learned is this community is freaking small. Don't burn any bridges. You have to eat shit just to keep a relationship. Do it because you'll never know whenever you're going to cross paths with that person again. You and I both know. We've both shared stories.
Oh, yes.
Right? So lesson number one right there is this is a small incestuous community that spans the entire globe. All right. So,
and that's no joke. I've met people that I knew in Bakersfield all the way over here, and I'm like, what the hell?
Oh, I'll meet a vendor that knows somebody from Los Angeles and they live in Oregon, and it's just it's crazy how small it is. But yeah, so I after high school, I delivered pizza for a little bit, and I was messing around, community college, trying to just figure out my path and having some fun being a young 20-year-old. But also I had this desire to also do something with my life, right? And I worked at this this attorney's office.
Yeah.
Who a friend of a friend of a friend who knew this person got me this job. And I was doing a Visual Basic, I think it was version 6 by that time. I was doing like, an early CRM. I don't even know what you'd call it. It was kind of a contact manager, and it like automated some documents, legal documents. And, I realized after a couple of years of that staring at code all day long was something I did not want to do for a living. Yeah. I was going a little bit insane. And then I moved to like a help desk position. I think it was a contractor that had a position out at General Electric in Tehachapi at the wind energy. And so I got to work on these computers, and it was just normal business help desk stuff. And they outsourced the call center to India, and they would assign tickets. But it was also part of like this industrial manufacturing that did wind turbines.
Mm-hmm.
And it was absolutely fascinating, the industry being a 21-year-old, 20-year-old, just moving into this real professional seat, and it was me just getting my feet wet. And that's where I pulled Tony over. They were hiring. I got Tony Sosa out there, and we sat in a trailer on the other side of this parking lot. And we cracked jokes and supported users, and oh, I got a story to tell you about Tony. So you remember the net? You know, in command line, there's the net. You can do net used,
Yeah.
map drive, net view, look at shares. So there used to be net send was a real popular command. You could send messages to a
Yep.
workstation or to a user and just kind of say, um, send a message. And sometimes you would use it to automate like some administrative alerts or whatnot.
Yeah.
And we were messing around with that. This was all new stuff to us. And he sent me a message. All right, here comes another bad word. You're gonna have to bleep it out.
No, you're fine.
He said, "What's up, bitch?" And about 30 seconds later, I get a phone call from the user, and he said, "Hey, everybody in my department just got a pop up that said, 'What's up, bitch?'" And this was Tony. I want to say it was like it was definitely his first month, maybe his first week. It was real early into his tenure there. And I'm like, oh crap. So I told him, I go, dude, what's the command that you just sent? Can I see it? He sent it to the domain.
Oh no.
And I went and told my boss, but I didn't do it in a like I wasn't tattletelling. I wasn't trying to snitch him out or anything. And I went back and said to our boss, I'm like, hey, me and Tony, we were learning something. This is the most childish thing, but this is what happened.
Hey, don't want to interrupt you, but can you adjust your camera so you're a little bit more up because, yeah, the screen's cutting you off.
Better now?
Yeah, you're good now. Sorry.
Yeah, so I told her, and she had already got alerted from some NetOps people on the East Coast. Like they were really good on their SecOps, right? So she had already got alerted, and it got blocked at our firewall. So it was probably 90 users, maybe.
Oh no.
But the domain consisted of 200,000 employees. Maybe 20,000 if we're just looking at that business unit. And she told me it got blocked at the firewall. And I'm like, okay, I'll let him know. Like, we're really sorry. We'll be way more careful and definitely be more professional. And she's like, don't tell him that the firewall blocked it. Tell him it went to everyone. Like, we want him to learn his lesson, right? And so she was upstairs in the main building, and I walked downstairs, and I walked across the parking lot over to our trailer, and there was this little awning. And at the time, I smoked cigarettes. I don't anymore, but at the time, I had left my cigarettes on this little like handrail outside of our office. And I walk up, and he did not smoke cigarettes, and I think he had smoked 4 or 5 of them. And he was outside our office door, and he was so scared that he was going to get fired. Oh man, and I we were good friends at that time, so I had to laugh and give him shit. I'm like, dude, like, you should see yourself right now. You are a mess. And he was stressing it, and I told him, I was like, Denise didn't want me to tell you that it was blocked to the firewall. She doesn't really care. You're gonna learn a lesson. You're gonna eat some shit. Like, we'll move on from it. It was cool, but it was a funny story. And those, it kind of goes back to what we were saying. It was the Wild West. We were learning these tools that were all brand new to us, and it was so fun.
I think all at one point or another we all have that like time where we think that it's a resume generating event. Like with that, with Tony, with that. For me, I was working at Bolt House, and we just acquired another company. And I was put in charge of setting up a couple domain controllers out at this said company, right? So I'm doing it, and I've set up multiple domain controllers. At that time, not a whole lot at corporate level, but I had my own MSP, so I'd done it for customers. And
You had taught it for years too, right?
yeah, I taught it at UEI, and I taught it at Kaplan, and so I was not a spring chicken to doing domain controllers. So I got assigned to set up these two domain controllers for redundancy out at this new location. It was out in Chicago or something, so I'm doing it remotely. And I honestly getting my feet wet with virtual boxes and stuff like that. Just I think we were working with Nutanix or something at the time. And so I'm connected and I'm setting up these domain controllers, and I set up one, it goes fine. I set up the other one, it goes fine. I look and see DNS is populating, or on one of them, and on the other one I see, in Active Directory I see the devices populating and everything. So I'm like, good, I'm good to go. These are just domain controllers, no big deal, right? So about 2 or 3 days later, my manager at the time was Brad, and Brad, you've met Brad. He was at you've met him at user groups. He was in charge of like vmug at one point.
Yeah, no, I like Brad. He's a smart guy.
He's an amazingly smart guy. I hope to get him on and do an interview with him one of these days. But anyway, so he's my manager, and he comes up to my desk and he's like, "Hey man, those domain controllers that you set up at said company?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Dude, I was checking them out, and one of them isn't populating DNS." So I'm like, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Can you take a look at it and fix it?" I'm like, "Sure." So I go, and sure enough, I look at the server, and it's not populating DNS. So I'm like, "Okay, well, let me fix it." Okay, now, knowing what I know now, the correct course of action would have been just a crap, shit can that Active Directory server and spin up a new one. It's brand new. It's not doing anything, right? That would have been the right course of action. Well, being that I didn't work on DNS a whole bunch, and I know DNS has to be on the box with Active Directory so that, it can talk, and because it's the backbone of Active Directory, I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure this has happened to someone else. Let me do some research. So I went to Google, the backup of every IT technician, right? I went to Google and I did some searching.
Pause you right there.
What's that?
I'm gonna pause you right there.
Sure.
To inject this. Lesson number 2 for everybody watching and everybody younger than us. We're all freaking morons. We know nothing. If we didn't have Google, we would still be delivering pizza.
Exactly.
All right, take it away.
So as you know, you don't go with the first article you see on Google, right? You have to do your research, read, and make sure that it makes sense, the steps that they're suggesting and stuff like that. So I had read this. I had read multiple articles, and they were all kind of pointing me the same direction. And I'm like, okay, I'm on page 2 of searches. I'm reading it. All the stuff is matching up. I'm like, okay, I think I got it. I have my plan written out. I wrote, I had it all documented and ready to go, and I'm following my steps. And, the steps was, go and set it up as a secondary, and then you add the DNS domains, and if you add it correctly, it'll just start populating. So I do that. And sure enough, I see stuff start populating in the DNS. I'm like, awesome, I got it. I got all the DNS domains in there. We had like 5 or something at the time. I have all the DNS domains in there. Everything's going great. And so I pop up and I say to Brad, hey, Brad, I got such and such location, Active Directory DNS fixed. It's working. I no sooner put a period on that sentence, and Scott, another guy that worked with, no, not Scott, Tim, another guy that worked with us, all of a sudden pops up and he goes, hey, is that why nothing's resolving for me? I went, huh? Go back. Sure enough, our entire DNS for the whole sub company is gone.
Oh no.
What had happened
Did
was
you
is when I
really
set
get
up
the
this secondary, it started populating, and then the main DNS did the call for the most up-to-date DNS, and the server I set up said, "Hey, I'm the most current," and then sent its information out to everyone else, which was partial. Oh man, if you didn't hear my heart hit the floor, I don't know what happened, but my head and my heart definitely hit the floor that day. And I'm like, "Oh crap." And I learned very quickly, it's all in how you handle it. Like, if you just shut down, you're gone, right? But immediately we were like, okay, what do we got to do? And one of our guys, Mike, he was like, I think we have backups of it. I'll just pull it from a backup. So me and Tim, we started manually putting in DNS records for everything that we could. We found out that people that were still connected were good. It was only if they were trying to reconnect that they had a problem. You know, sure enough, like a half an hour later, Mike restores the DNS from a backup, and we're all good. We're golden. But man, I thought I was gonna have I literally pulled up my resume and was like updating that sucker. Like, I'm out here. I'm done. This is like 2.5 months after I got the job, right? So I'm like, they're just gonna kick my ass out the door. Now I'll never forget it. Brad comes up to me and goes, "What happened?" And I explained to him what happened. And he goes, "So you had a plan?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you understand what you did wrong?" And I said, "I don't right now, but I'll find out. Like, I'm going to figure it out." And he goes, "Okay, when you figure it out, let me know." I said, "Okay." So like 2 hours later, I'd done a lot of research. I shit you not, the very next page on Google. So I did 2 pages of research. The third page I went on, the first result on that page said, "Whatever you do, don't do this." I was like, "Oh, good God." So I went through it. I wrote up my plan. I told him exactly what I had done. I showed that it was documented. We didn't think there was a risk because it was a new environment. We were just setting up new servers there. There wasn't a thought that it could go back and flash back on our internal network. Anyway, so, I showed that, I found what I did wrong, and I showed my solution. My solution was, if I run into this problem again, I don't try to fix DNS. I just blow away the server and start anew, because all it was Active Directory. So I take that from, to Brad, and he pulled Dane over, which was the guy that was in charge of our department. And they're both looking at me, and I'm explaining to them. They said, "Okay, put out your hand." I was like, "What?" They're like, "Put out your hand." I put my hand out like this, and they went, "Don't do that again." And they just let me go. So it was an important lesson, right? So we all screw up at one point or another, and it's how you handle it on whether they shit can you or not, right?
Oh yeah.
So
No, I guarantee, I know Dane. I don't know him well. I've had conversations at user group meetings. He's a really funny guy. I really like him.
yeah.
Talk to Brad. I don't know him super well, but again, I can guarantee both of them have had that
Oh yeah.
oh shit moment, right?
Well, I had found out like little bit later that it wasn't like a week or two before I got hired that Brad had his oh shit moment. And so it was just like, and then I talked to the other guys, and everyone's had their oh shit moment at one point or another. And so it's I guess what are we on? Lesson 3, 3, right? So lesson 3 is like, don't be worried. Everyone screws up. It's, again, how you handle it, right? That is the end result. If you do it, you don't know how you did it. You can't explain how you did it. And number 2, you do it again, then yes, update your resume.
Yeah. So that's it right there is, when I was managing, I had a guy that he messed up several times, right?
Yeah.
and he had these moments that stressed him out. And when I was talking to some of my peers in the management level and my boss, like, man, he's been kind of messing up. And I'm like, well, no, he messes a lot. He messes up a lot, but he does way more than you realize. And he's just young. He's learning.
Yep.
Like he's got this long list of stuff that he'll never do again.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had a ton of those moments. I've broken so many things, and that's how I learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I break it, I fix it. It's just,
Yep.
whether you're a mechanic or an IT guy or an astronaut, somebody has to figure this stuff out, right? And
I think part of the problem is so when you go to school, like when I was teaching at Kaplan and UAI, you go through obviously the book learning part of it, right? Where it's like, oh, before you do stuff, you do it in a test environment, and before you take it over to production. So you screw up your screw ups in the test environment, and you take it over to the production environment, and everything's hunky dory. What they don't tell you in those books is 90% of the freaking enterprises out there don't have test environments. Or they'll name a server like a test server, and that server will become a production server, and they'll never change the name to it. And then you think you're on a test box, and so you do something because you think you're on a test box, and next thing you know, you took down a whole division, and you're like, oh crap, what did I do? Then
you end up running like infrastructure and business systems in a big company that has a development team, and the development team has 100 different development boxes and 50 different test boxes and a couple prod environments. And that's all running on all of your prod, right? So when I mess up prod, I'm not only taking down the other team's prod, I'm taking down their test and their devs. And so there's hundreds of people that are sitting staring at a blank screen, right?
Yeah, especially when you're running like VMware or something like that, because it's all the same hardware. It's just multiple virtual machines on that hardware.
Yeah, I mean, there's good companies out there, and it's an experience game, right? Like, you definitely don't want to be super green. You got to kind of be honest with yourself and what your limits are, and what you feel comfortable doing, and whether or not the results are going to be very predictable or not.
Well, that's why we have the tiered system, right? That's why we have a tier 1, tier 2, and a tier 3 tech.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of people that come out of school. I would venture to say any school, but really, like Kaplan or UEI or any of the schools. I would even say MIT. Someone will come out of that school and they expect to get a job that gets them into a high-paying position right away. They expect to be the tier 3 technician. And it's like, wait. In this industry, you got to do a bit of paying your dues. You got to start at tier 1, because tier 1 gets you that help desk aspect of it, gets you working with the customers, realizing that even though that you're a technical person, you have to learn soft skills, which is more important than most people realize. You have to learn soft skills, and then then you go to tier 2, which tier 2 is helping out the people in tier 1, and you're getting some of the responsibility of owning an environment or a part of a process. And then you work your way up to tier 3, where you're like a subject matter expert in that area, and everyone calls you for that issue. Right? So I think that's a good thing that we have that tiered process, but I think sometimes people will try to get into IT and they try to get like, oh, well, I did A, B, and C schooling, so therefore I need to be here. It's like,
sure.
Wait, no.
Yeah, we're of that age, Jacob, or we're old, and we could talk about these entitled kids, and they don't know. Right? But it is.
I was that way too.
It's really weird. So I'll tell you a story about. There was a kid that we pulled in as an intern, and super smart kid. He was, I think, third or fourth year in college, doing really good, but had a little bit of this, entitlement, for lack of better terms. And he came in, it was my week to use him as the intern. And so I took him to the data center and I gave him a broom and I said, all right, you got to sweep. And he looked at me very confused and said, what are you talking about? And I said, you need to sweep the data center. And so he started sweeping the data center, and I could tell he was grinding his teeth while he was doing it. So I went out and got all the engineers, and we met him in the data center, and we helped him sweep up the trash and get everything out to the trash bin. And my lesson to him was that, this is also work. It's also a job. And whatever sexy IT thing that you think you know from watching movies, and commercials, and marketing material, the reality is most of this job is work, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
You're gonna sweat. You're gonna sweep because it's important to have a clean data center.
Man,
Like he didn't take the lesson. I bought him a shirt. I gave him a shirt after that. I bought him like a company shirt. Like I told him, I'm like, hey, this is a real lesson that I'm trying to embed in you. And he quit IT and started doing politics. So,
yeah.
like I ran him off. He thought I was very insensitive by doing that. It was unfortunate because he was a smart kid.
That's kind of why I point people to like the CompTIA certifications. Like I when me and you got into IT out of high school, no one gave a flying flip about certification. Like they didn't even care about college. It was like they needed anyone that had, if you knew how to turn on a computer and you could be halfway decent, they would hire you because there was such a need for technicians. I remember working for New Horizons Computer Learning Center, and I was a facilities technician there, which is just a fancy word for saying, I move computers. And there was guys there that were teaching that only got their certification in like NT 4.0 server, and I think they got like a CNA or Certified Network Administrator for Novell, and they were getting job offers for like 135,000 a year.
And this was 99, 98, right?
Yeah, this is 99.
Okay.
And so it was crazy. And then, I got my lifetime cert for A+, which is it's a crock of, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, so I did that, and I got workstation, and I got server, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get one of these $135,000 a year jobs, like right out of the gate, right? I'm going to stop being this facilities technician. And my next job was working for Office Max as a computer sales guy because, you got A+ certification, so that means you know how to sell computers. And it's like, not exactly, but, so I did that. And then at the same time, I started working for the school system. And then, so that lasted about a year and a half. And then I got the golden call from Phil letting me know the position at South High opened up. And so I came back down to work with my mentor, and I think that's, again, best decision I ever made. But no, so my thing is certifications have come into favor, gone out of favor. I think they're currently in favor. I think they lost favor back in the day when you had those exam crams that came out and everyone was like just cramming the answers. I knew at the time, like a lot of oil field workers would do that. Like they would leave the oil field, go to New Horizons where they had a special program for oil field workers, and they would literally get the printouts of exam crams and just cram the questions and then take the test, pass, and they devalued the certification, right? That's why we went to like a 3-year research kind of thing. No certification now is like a lifetime certification. It's always like a 3-year. Do you still believe in certifications, or where you at with it?
That's a good question. I haven't taken a cert test in years. I have the lifetime A+, I have the lifetime Net Plus. Getting a couple of the general certs under your belt is going to give you that slight advantage over most applicants who are trying to get their feet in the door, right? So if you're green and you just have a curiosity about the industry and you think that's what you want to do, I would definitely recommend getting some certs. And I think there's even some spaces out there that offer some free training and free certs that aren't they're not horrible. They're not super, super high detailed, but it's enough to put something on your resume other than, hey, I'm curious about these computers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So my opinion is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or put your 2 cents in, but my opinion is that to get a good foundation, you should start at, like, if you're green, like if you're coming into it and you don't even know how to power on a computer. I know that we're in the day and age everyone knows how to power on a computer, but most people power on a computer, they go to Microsoft Word or they go to Google, or they have one of those Chromebooks, which,
Sure.
is Google everything, right? That they really got our kids into now, right? They think they know how to use computers, but they're just using a glorified browser,
Well,
right?
it's relevant. Like that's a whole other
It's
conversation.
yeah, it's relevant, but it's like, the thing that we've ran into in the past, I think you would agree, is you get someone that, played a couple games and stuff like that, didn't do a lot of research, but they think they can fix computers, and then next thing you know, you're going in behind them and cleaning up their mess, which is okay to do if it's your own computer. Like if it's your own stuff, it's cool. You can screw that stuff up all you want. I did it with my first computer. I'm sure you did it with your first computer. And probably the subsequent computers. I'm still screwing with my computers and messing them up. But the one thing I don't do is get a customer and go to the customer and screw up their computer and charge them for it,
For
right?
sure.
So what my suggestion is usually is like, you in the industry, you gotta build the foundation, because your house is not good unless you have a good foundation. So my thought process is you look at CompTIA Foundation, um, Plus, or Fundamentals. I just
Sure.
called it Foundation, but CompTIA Fundamentals Plus, which is like your very basic certification. It just tells you what things are. Okay, and then if you want to go deeper, um, I think every tech should at least have A plus, Net plus, and Security plus, and probably even Server plus. But really, the first three: A plus, Net plus, and Security plus, because at one point or another, we all have to deal with IP addresses.
Yep.
We all have to deal with subnetting at some point, or understanding what the gateway does. We need to understand how to plug in a card on a computer, or understand what may be failing. And not everyone uses the OSI model, but if you're looking at the 7-layer OSI model, or even the 5-layer TCP/IP model, but there's a whole process on how you troubleshoot that stuff, and I think that goes into programming. I think that goes into security. I think it goes into networking, and it goes into the different paths that you could take that break off of the basics. I think your A plus, Net plus, and Security plus are like that foundational stuff that kind of gets you, number one, your foot in the door, and gives you just enough knowledge to be dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It's going to give you an advantage on your resume. It's going to give you that experience with yourself to to get past the point where you're just curious about the industry, and gives you some a little bit of grind to say, okay, this is actually something I really want to do. I think I'm going to be good at it. It's not just a trendy, sexy thing that sounds good today. But yeah, you're right. It gives you a foundation on the different areas of the IT industry. And even if you're focused, when you get your foot in the door and you have to be the smartest person in the room at tier one, you know which direction to delegate. Is this the NetOps team? Is this your infrastructure team? Is this development? Like you have enough of an understanding of what those terms mean, to give you an advantage. So I agree with that. Like, and then once you're in the door, you start working and building these relationships, with the engineering group, and you find yourself, kind of partnering up with the network team and say, hey, the network thing's kind of cool, and they start teaching you, I'm going to go change the VLAN on this access board, or here's how we do a trunk, and you start learning some of these things, and seeing command line and getting past the intimidation of it. And it's, you just kind of naturally find your fill. And most companies, at least the companies that I've worked for, that there is an educational component to your employment there, and they'll send you. I've been sent to several training boot camps, and they may or may not pay for the certification themselves, but at least for the education.
Yeah.
So once you get in the door, then you start. You're at company A, and they happen to use this manufacturer for their switching technology. They'll usually send you to get certified or at least trained on that switching technology.
Yeah.
And usually it's not so specific a niche that it's has no value anywhere else.
Yeah.
Usually something you take with you and you keep it on your resume, and you just kind of build your toolbox. I always call it my toolbox, my intellectual toolbox.
Yep.
I did development, so I have that in my toolbox.
Yep.
And I've done networking, and I've done infrastructure, and I've done software systems and application tiers and all the different little things. And I feel like I'm not a specialist, and I'm not, they sit me next to like a real engineer that focuses on one thing their whole life. And I'm never smarter than any of these people, but I could have a conversation with all of the people, right? I could have an intelligent conversation. I could talk about sand fabrics, and I could talk about all these different weird things that I've come across in my career, and have at least an intelligent conversation.
Yep.
And I have the advantage of I'm always the person that has something to learn.
Yep.
So it it works out to be a generalist is a fun thing to do, and it's I started as a generalist, and I still am a generalist, even though I have tons of engineering under my belt.
Yep.
I don't have an ego attached to it.
Yeah, I've met guys, as I'm sure you have, that they come in and they think they're God's gift to one area, and that's great. But I've always taken the approach of like, so the best analogy I have where it is, when I worked for Office Max, I got hired like the day I walked into the store. I mean, the Office Max isn't around anymore, but when I walked in the store, I got the job because, number one, I told them I was A+ certified, and I kind of, impressed the manager. And so I started working there in computer sales. But when there wasn't a customer in the store, like when it was slow, instead of standing around in the computer area trying to sell nobody a computer, I would go see what they were doing in the printing department. Like, hey, how are you doing this? And how does this work? And how does that work? And, or going up to the cashier and figuring out how to be a cashier, or going up to customer service and asking them about that, things like that, and just trying to figure out what was going on. And when they needed extra help, I volunteer to come in and help stock overnight or do this and that, just figure different things. And within 6 months of working there, I was being offered customer service manager, which I ended up taking. And then when the manager of that store left, he offered me to go with him to be assistant manager of the store he was taking over, and stuff like that. And the reason why I'm saying this, or even bringing this up, is I feel that IT is kind of the same way, right? In IT, there's so much. The field is so vast that there's no possible way that one person, not even Elon Musk, is going to know everything about IT. It's just too vast. You got different sections. You got security, you have networking, you have programming, you have engineering, which I'm into right now and you're into, and things like that. It's so vast that you can't be a subject matter expert on everything. So maybe what you do is you pick like right now, what I've found going through IT, and it's probably been the same for you, is they'll come up to you and say, we need someone to do X. And you're like, well, I don't know X, but I'll figure it out. And so you go in, you figure it out, you become the subject matter expert on that. But at the same time that you're doing that, you're paying attention to what else is going on around you so that you have a better understanding. You might not have like 100% understanding on it, but you could tape it together if you had to.
Yep.
You got to keep that open, and you always got to keep learning.
So you just put that metaphoric SX in your toolbox, right? So I think that's our next lesson, Jacob,
Yeah.
is always stay humble and always consider yourself a student to the industry.
Yeah.
Because the moment you don't, you're going to fail because you're not like, you're never the best at anything, right?
Yeah.
The only thing you have to strive to be the best at is being yourself.
Yeah.
So that's our next lesson, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, what are your feelings about the cloud, my friend?
Oh, it has its place.
Yep.
Uh, it's interesting. Um, it's my the marketing around the cloud is probably the biggest detriment to it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a data center, and then there's a data center someplace else, and that's the cloud, right? So it's not special,
Yeah.
except for maybe it's a bigger data center, and maybe there's some software in front of that data center that can take your application and make it stretch out over multiple data centers. And then maybe there's some software in front of that can dynamically consume resources if you need it, and then give it back when you don't need it. And it's just some fancy software.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the cloud has its place. There's some really cool things being done in the cloud. And I think the resources and attention being given to this cloud is pretty awesome. But I think that cloud providers and then these partners that sit in front of those cloud providers coming in and saying, we're going to save the day and make everything cheaper, and there's so much possibilities, and your business is going to turn into this machine learning AI driven, top, Gartner, what is it, the Gartner quadrant
Yeah.
leader, because you're in the cloud. There's so much BS behind the marketing of it.
Oh,
The
yeah.
reality is there's some cool stuff.
Yeah.
It has its place, but for you to come in and say forklift your data center, especially when you're a company with renewable energy, you're a company that owns its property, you're a company that's been doing this for a long time, and you're very lean and you figured out how to do it efficiently, you're not going to come in and charge them $200,000 a month for this data center that costs them, pennies on the dollar to run because you're good at it, and expect to have a meaningful conversation.
I think that's my favorite thing about the cloud. Okay. So, first of all, the cloud is just a marketing thing because, where the cloud came from is on every network diagram that you've ever seen since the beginning of time, the internet has been represented as a cloud because it was so vast that it had so many connections that you couldn't like depict it in any other way than just putting a cloud and saying that's the internet. Right.
It's everything else. Everything else is over there.
Yeah, everything that doesn't exist in our network is over here. And so, some genius marketer looked at a network diagram and went, what's that? Someone said, that's the internet, that's the cloud. And they went, oh, there we go. And, what I break it down to is you're running your stuff on someone else's equipment. And
Totally.
and that's basically all you're doing. It's a data center that's just not sitting at your location. Now, I've been told time and time again by, the cloud providers and by marketers and stuff like that this isn't the case. But the thing that's always kind of worried me, and it will continue to worry me, and maybe I'm off kilter on this, but when you take your data and you give it to someone else, you no longer truly own that data. Like if it's sitting on someone else's hardware, yes, you own that data, but do you truly? Like if they decided one day to turn off the switch and say, we now own it, what is your fight? You know what I mean?
So there's arguments against that because we could talk about encryption at rest, and
Yeah.
if I have the keys to data and they don't, that it becomes just pseudo random noise. So, but I would say you could guarantee that you own the data, but the transport of
Yeah.
that data or the consumption of that data or the availability is in someone else's hands,
Yeah.
there's a risk.
Yeah.
But it's a weird conversation for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I understand there's encryption at rest, and so like technically they're not supposed to be in there, be able to go in and see your financial statements and all that stuff. But there could be an argument on that as well, because how many times have you heard about someone at said company having rights to something that they shouldn't have rights to, and next thing you know, it's public. That's happened quite a few times now, right?
Well,
Or
there's
let's,
mistakes. There's we're talking about there's a joke that I like is what's the difference between theory and practice? The difference is in theory they're the same,
yeah,
right? So in theory we can make some assertions that something is secure.
yeah,
In practice,
nothing's secure. After being in security for a while, I can tell you nothing's secure. We're constantly in a battle of trying to stop the bad actors, and they always have new tactics, and they're always ahead of us because there's more of them than there is us. So that you'll read or you'll do research, and they'll tell you like this encryption is uncrackable, then the next thing you know, someone's cracked it. Like so
yeah.
it's that my worry has been like, you got, so a lot of these cloud companies, and I'm not trying to talk crap, I'm just thinking about it, is like a lot of these cloud companies, they went after the corporations first, right? Like forklift your data center, do this, go into the cloud. By going in the cloud, you only pay for what you use. And it's been my experience time after time that usually the sales guy will come in, they'll do an assessment on the network, they'll do assessment on the hardware that you have, they'll do assessment on your compute, and they'll say, oh, you're going to have X amount of savings, right? But 9 times out of 10, it's the opposite. You actually spend more money going to the cloud than you do keeping your own hardware on site, obviously, because you're paying for someone else's hardware. I mean, anyone that didn't see that writing on the wall missed something. Okay, so there's that. And then I'm thinking about the small, maybe because I used to run a mom and pop shop, and I used to work for mom and pop shops. There's times when you're running your business that you're trying to decide whether you pay the government or you pay your employees. I ran into that myself, okay? Because it's like, okay, well, if I have to pay my employee, or if I have a choice between, I did this when I closed my business and I ended up having to pay for it and digging out of a hole. But during 2008, when we had the downturn in the market, when I was going to close my business, I had one employee left, and I chose to pay his paycheck, his last paycheck, rather than pay what I owed the government on like wholesale costs or something like that. I forget exactly what it was, but it definitely is something that got me in trouble. Okay, so my thought is, and I've also been in companies where, some of them are almost living paycheck to paycheck, being a small mom and pop shop, and that's what they got to do. And you got these cloud providers saying, oh, don't host your stuff there, put it in the cloud. What if one day their decision on paying their employee overrides their decision to pay the host? You know what I mean? Then they kind of cut their knees off, right? They if they're hosting other customers, you could also argue that company should have the financial wherewithal to make sure that they have the money and the resources stored up, that they're always taking care of their customer, because if they're collecting money from their customer, they should be paying the bill for the host, stuff like that. I get that. But at the same time, I've also been in the situation where you had the market downturn in 2008 where I had I was on track to making a ton of money that year, and had like receivables of like $250,000, and just overnight everyone stopped paying, like literally like a light switch. And so as a small business owner, when you hit that, at the same time, I don't want to get too political, but when you have the government also increasing your taxes during that time, while your customers aren't paying, what do you do? Like, and then where do you leave everyone? You know what I mean? So it's the cloud in that aspect kind of still scares me a little bit because, and I'm saying this being a customer of the cloud, right? My stuff is in the cloud, and the company I work for obviously uses the cloud a lot, but I'm just thinking of these small businesses. Like, when you don't own your own hardware, you don't really control. Like, if you had to make a decision owning your own hardware, you could probably get that to run a little bit longer until you get your next paycheck. You know what I mean?
So there's a lot of arguments.
Yeah.
So I think we're venturing out of information technology and just kind of business engineering, and maybe just talking about your character and your integrity and your moral compass, right? And
I told you this is all over the place. I'm not. It's very lax and.
Yeah, no. It's a good conversation because it's, we could do a whole nother episode on this topic. But like, think about the power grid.
Yeah.
If I have a generator versus I have to pay PG&E.
Yep.
If you can't pay PG&E, I mean, your business doesn't run, right? So your servers can't turn on.
Yep.
And so it's kind of the same thing. It becomes a utility.
Yep.
Right. And there's definitely risk with running a business and how your income and all these different variables, and you get put in some really hard decisions.
Yeah.
Or places where you have to make some difficult decisions. And certainly, I applaud you for thinking people first, and
kind of stupidly.
No, I don't think so. I think the people, I probably know these people you're talking about.
Yeah.
And whether or not they know what position you were in, they definitely appreciate the decisions you made. And I work for the government now, so I can't say that taxes are bad. Because taxes, I think taxes do a lot.
Oh, I agree.
They're necessary for the infrastructure of the environment we live in.
Yeah.
It definitely becomes very hard. It's easy to poke at, and it's complex. It's a system. Yeah. It's not an information technology system. It's a people system, and it's a business management system, and it's a life system. And you had to make some decisions, and you had to write your story with some variables and some programming into your head.
You did what you had to do. It is definitely a lesson, that's for sure. But I just don't get me wrong, I see the merits of the cloud as well. So like, I have enterprise email without having an enterprise server in my environment right now. I get that. I've always been kind of sketchy when you put the responsibility of your data in someone else's hands. You know what I mean? Like, because even something as simple as like, if your data center goes down and you're hosting maybe yourself and one other customer, you're only affecting yourself and one other customer. When AWS or something goes down, because mistakes happen, we talked about making mistakes, right? So I'm not going to fault them. Mistakes happen, but it's the whole nation goes down.
No, for sure. But when we're talking about downtime, there's risk, and there's there's redundancies and high availabilities and fault tolerances built in to both different models.
And all of them fail.
It's not if, it's when, right?
Yeah.
But, I was talking to Exchange Online. Let's use that as an example. We went from on-prem Exchange to Office 365 hosted Exchange.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the CIO of a company, and he was telling me that when he's talking to ownership, if he says that our Exchange servers went down and we're not able to make any money, and the sales team is sitting at their desk bored, and they don't know about it because they're not getting their emails either, when it's our server and our engineers that made the mistake that caused everything to go down, it's a very, very, very different conversation than if Microsoft went down.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
there's a liability deferral that's happening,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
that's at his level, right? So there's a lot to it. I don't think there's a right answer whether or not cloud is
yeah.
good or bad. I think the marketing around cloud is bad.
Yeah.
That's that's where I land.
Yeah. Everyone has the new gadget the next month, and they're always in the what quadrant did they call it? The game changer quadrant. And it's like, okay, the company I'm with right now was in that quadrant 2 months ago. Like,
Well, everybody wants to be the leader
yeah.
and evolve the industry.
Shoot, I think Norton is still in the game changer quadrant.
That's funny.
But no, I find it very interesting where everything's going. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I won't lie, my first career path choice was I wanted to be a pilot. And then
Oh,
I had a couple of things that kind of stepped in my way, right? I had a bum foot, I had childhood epilepsy, and I had a lazy eye. So I was just wrong for that career path.
can we agree to call it a wonky eye? That's way
Yeah, I got corrected. It's no longer wonky, so I'm
all
happy.
right.
I got corrected like 3 months ago. I'm super happy about it.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So anyway, so IT was like just the next thing I went into, and I found that I had a taste for it and went for it. I mean, what was your dream as a kid?
So I actually wanted to be a firefighter.
Mm.
I had a neighbor who was a firefighter, and he so it was weird. I was doing coincidentally some computer work. He was writing a textbook for college and needed some images done. And I literally did like hundreds of pictures in paintbrush because that was the only tool I had available for this guy. And but what I had to do is I had to read this college textbook in order to figure it out. And I think I was 12 years old. I was a young kid learning, and I think he gave me these pictures to go recreate on a computer, so
Uh-huh.
I'd leave him the hell alone. Like I was asking him stupid questions about his computer and about the fire department, and I was bugging him. He was a single dad. Um, his daughter was a couple years older than me. Yeah, it was just a weird thing. Like I was a pesky little annoying kid. Like now I'm just a pesky big annoying adult.
Oh,
But like he had me do this thing, and so I was learning about the fire department and like different classes of fires, and like it got me curious about it, and that's what I wanted to do. And I just never pursued it. I don't I don't know why. I got into the IT thing, and I I think the fact that I was allowed to be fat and lazy and still be good at computers. I don't think you're allowed to be fat and lazy and still be a badass firefighter. So it was kind of the path of least resistance.
yeah.
But I do want to tell you something. But like you triggered a memory about Phil and Kareem.
Okay.
Before you guys were playing TA, we used to play a game called Dragon Realms,
Yes, I
and it
remember
was
that.
all text based. It was called a MUD.
Yeah.
So, they call them MMORPGs now. It
Yeah.
was that, but it was just words,
Yeah.
right? And that was the funnest game I've ever played in my life. And it was one of their mottos was, your imagination's the best video card ever, right? Or your imagination has the best graphics. And I haven't got serious about playing any game ever since. It's so much fun playing this.
Well, I remember you guys used to have that thing script, and then I think it was what was the other one he played? Oh gosh, I forget. Something it may have been the same one, but I remember at one point it had like a somewhat graphical interface, and Phil had figured out how to script it so he'd be building experience as we went to
Yeah.
lunch. He would like start his script, walk away, and he had it built so it did a lot of if statements. So if something happened, it would automatically do a response to that and do another cycle. He was crazy.
So that was AI. That's what,
Yeah.
right? Way before AI
Oh yeah.
existed, we were trying to make these things look human by building imperfection into them,
Yep.
randomness and variability. And it was so stupid. Like I did the same thing. Like on my lunch break, I'd run to the lab and I'd remote into my home computer and check a telnet script that was doing this thing. And like the game was not getting caught scripting. It wasn't the content of the game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Because if you got noticed, you would get banned. I remember
yeah,
that. And I just that I don't know if Phil ever said this to you. I'm sure he did at some point, but because obviously you've done well, and um, but the greatest compliment I ever got from Phil is like, I think it was a year or two after high school. You'd gone on to do your thing, and I ended up working at South High, and you had that program that you had built, and it was kind of sitting there still. No one was, like you said, no one was really doing anything with it, but it was there and stuff like that. And I don't know if you remember in like 2001, 2002, ASP was very popular. Microsoft ASP, and using like front page and stuff like that.
oh yeah, yeah.
So I had gotten to know Dreamweaver, and so I had gotten a license of Dreamweaver, and it was owned by Micromedia at the time. This is before Adobe bought it out. And,
Macro media.
and Macromedia, thank you.
Yeah, so
So
they were the founders of Flash, right?
yeah, they're the ones that created Flash, and they're the ones that did Shockwave and everything else. People think Adobe did it. No, Macromedia did it, and Adobe bought it. Anyway, so anyway, I'd done something for this company called NitroSurf, where I was doing like a side gig, where they were selling dial-up service, and they needed their website to where someone could go to it, put in a zip code, and get like the phone number for their area so they could do dial-up. And that was like my first foray into like a database where I had like an actual phone number database and had the zip codes that matched with it and stuff like that, and what different zip codes worked for what. And I used ASP with some general calls to a database so it would pull that up. And then that foray went into, I built the system for South High that teachers could basically say they wanted a site, and it was basically like you've heard of Squarespace, right? Where you just drag and drop kind of thing. It's basically Squarespace before Squarespace was Squarespace.
Sure.
And so I did this all in ASP, and I had it set up so you could upload videos and you could select like the resolution and all that stuff. And I think the whole school was running on DSL at the time, maybe like 1.5 megabits per second or something stupid like that. Anyway, so I did this, and I completed it, and I had a couple of teachers that signed up for it, and I had them on there. They had their own calendars, they had their own assignments and stuff. It's basically like Google Classroom before Google Classroom existed. And I used your application that you had built as like is like just a starting point for it. Like I took some of the ideas that you had and put it into this, and I didn't use Visual Basic. Well, I did use some ASP used Visual Basic and CSS and stuff like that, and JavaScript and stuff like that. So I was doing that stuff, and I pulled Phil in, and I had showed him what you had done and what I had done and how I had it set up and how it was working. And Phil turned to me and looked at me with a blank stare and looked at it, and he goes, "Jacob, you've surpassed me." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "You've surpassed me. You've gone past what I can teach you now." I was like,
He's so full of shit.
he's full of crap. He's full of crap. I know he is, but it was like at the time I was like 20, I want to say 22, 23. At the time it was like the best thing someone could ever say to me. It was like, he's full of crap, but still it was like, it is awesome.
So
He's definitely a neat guy. So
I need to reconnect with him. Like I think he made some comments on one of the videos. Um, but yeah, when I was, when I was at the high school, I didn't realize the value of who he was to me
yeah,
after I left. I kind of at the time was, oh, he's just another teacher, and this is just this crap that I have to do,
yeah,
and that there's no method to it. I just kind of think it's fun, and like there's no difference between me just liking math and then liking these computer things,
yeah,
right? And then when I left and got in the world, I'm like, oh man, this guy like kind of like cleared, you know, cleared the road for me to learn
yeah.
and become who I am. And I've never had that opportunity to reconnect with him and actually tell him how much I appreciated everything he did for me.
Dude, I've taken the opportunity to tell him exactly how I feel about what he's done for me. And the guy is he's such a, he will never like accept credit for what he's done. Like he's so humble. Because I've straight out, like, when he commented on that video, so you had made a comment about the speakers I have in the background. Like I got these, let me get to the right side. Yeah. So I have these speakers in the background that my friend had built and basically gave to me. And I think I was talking about them in a video, and you made some kind of comment about the woofer size or something. And Phil commented on that, and I was like, oh crap, it's Phil. And I think I told you about it, and I was trying to show you, and the fool deleted his comment, so I couldn't show it. He does that. He'll make a comment on a video, and then he'll just long enough that you see it, and then he'll go delete it. Like, it's so funny. But anyway, like not even 3 weeks ago, I said something about he needed to DM me. He needed to DM me on so we can get in contact and stuff like that. So he actually, probably through the description of the video, found my email and emailed me and was like, hey man, how you doing? And so I was like, oh cool. And I wrote him something, and he wrote me back, and in that email I sent him, I was like, dude, you changed my life. And it's just like, the next email he responded to me, he's just like, yeah, whatever. It's like, that guy will never take credit for anything. But he's awesome. He's Mr. Off the Grid now. It's
Yeah,
kind of
like,
funny.
it's cool. It taught me to be a little more like patient with the young kids that are coming in,
Oh yeah.
and teach, be a teacher, be a mentor, be um, kind of lose the ego. Like
Yeah.
it's I don't know. What a cool guy though. Like that's I'm glad we have him in common.
Well, in the, I mean, to be honest, he's the whole reason why I'm doing any of this. Like the YouTube channel, and wanting to do like free classes and stuff, and doing these live streams and stuff. He's the reason why I'm doing it, because he instilled in me, through how he helped me and mentored me, he instilled in me the want to like pass it on to others. That's the whole reason why I did like UEI and Kaplan College. I sure as hell didn't do it for the pay. I did it because I had the chance to work with people. And the interview I'm gonna have after you is Jonathan Cathnes. He's a really cool guy. He was one of my students at Kaplan College.
Okay.
And I mean, if you're gonna do the degrees of separation, I think some of the credit he gives me for helping him has to go back to the fact Phil helped me at one point, and has to go back to the fact that you introduced me to Phil. You know what I mean? So I have to give you some of that credit as well. So you're part of the reason why this channel is up and running.
Well,
So,
it's not credit. It's just it's our story, right? And
yeah.
those
Yep.
and those relationships and not burning bridges
Yep.
and valuing the people around you that helped you get to where you are. And it's a small world. It's a short life. We can make the best of it. And this is just something we have in common. And there's plenty of other people that know other things and do different things and know other people.
Oh yeah.
And they're, have just as cool of a story as we do. And that's all okay.
Hey, everyone's story is and how they got somewhere is all important and works out. Hey, we've been going at this almost 2 hours. I'm sure that
Holy crap, you're right.
Yeah, I'm sure you got family to deal with. So I'm a close this out, but stay on because I'll chat with you a little bit after. But thank you so much for joining me. And if you ever want to join again, if you want to talk about another subject, or if you want to, like you said, talk about cloud in general or anything like that, or even if you want to join me on some of the training stuff, man, the door is always open.
Hey, listen, man, it's my pleasure, and I'm available to you anytime. I had a blast, and yeah, pick a topic, and we'll tear it apart. We'll have some fun doing it.
All right. Well, I'm gonna close this thing out real quick. Thank you, Matt Mitchell, for joining me tonight. Thank you, anyone that's watched. We've had 12 viewers during the actual talk at different points. Probably 6 of those have been Matt. So hopefully, we have some viewers that watch this after. It's going to be a long one if you watch it for 2 hours. I more power to you. Thank you so much for doing that. Hopefully you found some of these stories helpful and fun to hear, and has helped you in some way or another. And I want to thank you again for joining me, and hopefully you're healthy and safe, your family's healthy and safe, and everything's great. And see you next time. Thank you.